So how do we start again?
I don't know. The start is always the hardest. Or the ending. Not sure
Yeah,
about that yet.
ending is just like and follow.
Fair enough, and see you next time.
A good opener, and I think that's the main reason we're also sitting here today is most probably Sugi, our sensei we had together, or for how many years I don't know, but like for the 17 years I did karate, this was the big vision to go or follow his path or follow his wisdom, and it was always funny, but also very teachable, I think.
What did you most like about him or appreciate about him? Because he was a very, let's say, special character.
I think his brutal honesty. Like he told you if you did something wrong, or in German he always said like he couldn't differentiate between cheating and doing it fucked up, because in German it's very close to words, and he always said fucked up, and I was like no, I'm not allowed to say this, and I loved it because you knew he was right on both ways. So you shouldn't cheat, but you also shouldn't fuck up your
Yeah.
movement style. And that's my favorite memories when he said, don't move beschissen instead of bescheißen. So that's one of my favorite memories of Sugi.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, he was very brutally honest. And I took that personally. Um, he always told me that I'm basically like just a stick, that I don't have any muscle. And I took that very personally because I went to the gym afterwards. That's how my gym journey actually started.
Yeah, I think he had always quite a positive influence on us, even though sometimes he was maybe not in a nice wording say, but he always had the big vision in mind to make everybody better. Like, is it technical wise or also with his wisdom? Sometimes he said something during practice and I was like, what the heck? I don't get it. And like 3-4 years later, is it in practice or in your work life or something, you're like, that's what he meant. And these key moments I still have today, even though he passed away 5 years ago. I still sometimes remember things he said, or this cheating or fucked up movement style. I remember even today, every practice it pops up in my mind, and to try to keep it in the memory. Yeah.
What are some specific examples? Like what stands out to you in that regard when you think about him or what he said?
I think he had a very nice and very honorable approach in combining very traditional martial arts, which is something very different from sports karate, I think. And I always liked that he has this differentiating view. So he was like, we do martial arts, it's an art, it's not sport karate, but we also do competition, because competitions are important to further grow as an athlete, as a coach, as a mentor, to learn also the other side. But we always should stay grounded and stay in the martial art and develop our own martial arts. Because as soon as you turned, or you made it, you became a black belt, he always like, now your journey really starts. And you're like, yeah, but what did I do the last 10 years? And then you realize only then the real karate starts. And I think to realize that you're like practiced 10 years to just get started, it's insane in my eyes. And I really love this way of thinking and his way of combining these facts and this background information. That's, for me, still one of the most important people in my life, even though it's like already a long time ago, or it feels like an eternity ago. But like for 17 years, it was like the vision to always follow his knowledge and what he's teaching. So that was it for me. I think you also visited quite a lot of central trainings, as we called them back in the day. And do you remember the Kisamitsuki Kyakusugi combinations? I think I did them a million times.
I remember them, yes. They were, I think, his favorite exercise. I cannot imagine why we would do this so many times if it weren't his favorite. So one could say that he was really not just a sensei in a sense of a coach to you, but more like a mentor. Only in karate, what kind of in the technical aspects, or also on a personal level, kind of, or kind of going beyond karate?
I think he shaped the person I am today with a big degree, not just through him, but also through his pupils. Like all the people he taught that taught us at the end of the day, he lived on through his students, and his students provided it further to their students, and so on. And I think everything, or not everything, but almost everything we learned, or I learned in karate, I'm able to use nowadays in everyday life. It's not just in sports or in business, but it translates in so many aspects, like in your relationship, in your work life, in your sports life, in everyday life. Like respect everybody and everything, and be aware of what you do and why you do things, and ask yourself some questions and think about things, and not just accept everything and say, yes, I do it because you said it. Like really ask behind why do you say this, or what do you mean exactly? And following up on that, I think he also gave a lot of perspective in that area. I don't know how that was for you, but I think always this quite different or changing perspective helped me to view it from different point of views, and I could generate a different mindset through that, because you never know everything, but you can keep on learning continuously.
I mean, for me it was similar, maybe not to the same degree as it was for you, but I think you also knew him for a longer period of time, I believe. I don't know if we started at the same time.
Yeah, I think there has been some minor difference. I started in karate in 2005, when I was like yay short and yay unexperienced, but I was 6.5 years old, something like that, and I practiced until 2022, so these 17 years, and I started going to these trainings with him, I think in 2009, because in 2009 was my first summer camp, if I recall correctly. That was the last one in Lucerne before we moved it to Bern, and it was like 5 days, and I was the only child there, and I died every day with like 6 hours of practice. I was so dead the last day. I barely made it to the gym, but I pulled through, and that's like, yeah, 2009 was my first summer camp, I think, and yeah, very, very intense.
In general, I also started in 2005, practice until 2020. Basically, I ended my karate career, if you want to call it like this, with the pandemic. But I started going to summer camps and the central trainings, I think, a bit later than you did, because I was never in Lucerne. I always was in Bern. Mm-hmm. But also then the trainings were brutal. After 6 hours, you're just completely wasted. And then you have 3 or 4 more days of this following that.
Just jumping into that, because I hear a lot of different opinions in the martial arts area, do you think it's a good or smart idea? Like, as you remember, we were like really children, like children. Yeah. And you practice for like 5 days, every day for like 6 hours-ish. Then you still do some stretching, of course, and you mostly train with adults. They have different kind of powers. It's still a martial art, so there's some contact, of course, very controlled. But I also hear a lot of voices say, hey, it should be only adults to a certain degree, or maybe youth kind of from 14, 15-year-olds. And I honestly don't know what would be a smart move, because I don't think everything we did was that healthy.
It depends. So I don't think that you should let really small children, as I was when I started, I was 7 years old. I wouldn't let children like this train together with adults. I think they should be trained separately, because first of all, just the physical differences are enormous, especially when you get paired up for fights, or like kumite. Even though you're not going full contact, because we did Shotokan karate, which is generally not with any full contact, there's some exceptions, but generally you basically just stop short, right? Despite this, I think the physical differences, even if it's just height, are just too big. But also the teaching style is very different. When I think back to the training I got as a child and kind of how it was taught, that was very different from when I was an adult. But I think as soon as you start to become a teenager, maybe it's hard to put a set age on that, maybe around 12 to 15, in that range somewhere, I think it starts to be okay if you train with adults. And I also appreciated it always because I'm a woman. When I was a teenager, I was very thin, maybe 40, 50 kilograms, really light. Essentially, it's still a form of self-defense. So to me, it was always cool to train with the tallest, biggest guy in the room, because if I had to face a real life situation, which I had once, but kind of just thinking, having that in mind, that maybe at some day you will need to defend yourself, and then it's not going to be the guy who is the same weight and the same height as you, because he will probably not attack you. It's probably going to be someone who's taller, heavier, more muscular, stronger than you. So you need to be able to defend yourself against those people as well.
But do you really, and sorry for jumping in, but
go ahead.
Do you really think if somebody from, I'm 6'3", I'm 110 kilograms, and I have some martial arts experience, if you're brutally honest, if somebody also from MMA comes along, like full contact, fight experience, do you think there is a chance when the weight difference is bigger than 20 kilograms? I personally believe you can be the best in whatever you do if there's a weight difference from 20 kg plus, maybe 30 in some cases. It's super tough to fight somebody heavier than you are, also taller.
I think it depends on the context. So now with you, I wouldn't pick a fight, because even though no, I mean, you're, 30 kilos heavier than I am?
Yeah, 110-ish.
Okay, then it's 40 kilos heavier than I am. Damn, you're 1.5 times as heavy as I am. Okay. Anyway, and you know martial arts, you have a black belt in karate. So no, I wouldn't pick a fight with you, because probably I would lose. I would have to get very lucky. But, and I had once the experience, I was once walking home, I was attacked, and I got out of it, and the guy was like 2 meters tall, and I don't know how heavy, but he looked big. I got out of that situation. I don't know if he had a background in martial arts, probably he didn't, but he for sure had some strength, but just having that background, knowing what to do, how to react, that definitely helped. So I would say it really depends on the context and who your opponent is, whether it's kind of a controlled setting, like in a fight during training, or whether it's on the streets.
I think it's a good baseline. Like, you already walk around differently. Like, your posture is way more, hey, don't pick a fight with me, or you're aware of, okay, maybe I shouldn't go in a dark alley alone during the night in a city I don't know. You know, just these kind of basics. But also there, as you said, you might got lucky that nothing else happened, but as soon as somebody has some fighting experience, I believe it's super tough. And I think it's really dangerous that we put the information out there. Yeah, you go in a self-defense class for half an hour and you're gonna win every fight, because that's what a lot of people do, because it's marketing, it works. But in my eyes, it's super dangerous, because some people might get themselves into a situation through that self-esteem they gained in that course, which they probably shouldn't. And if they wouldn't have been in this training or in this self-defense class, they wouldn't even get into the situation. I know it's quite an edge case, but for me, that's something that's quite dangerous to teach people, half an hour and you know what to do, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Because even though after 15 years of karate, that situation I was in, I was still lucky. There's always a little bit of luck involved. It could have ended very differently. And yeah, I mean, I've practiced for 15 years. I have a black belt. I would argue that I do have quite a lot of experience that goes beyond just 1 or 2 evening classes of self-defense. So yes, this is definitely a dangerous claim to make, even though I see why it's been done for marketing purposes. Although I would argue as well that it's not useless. You just have to be aware of the limitations. You still shouldn't provoke any fights, which you generally shouldn't do. And it's one thing that is also taught by many martial arts, actually. that there's no first strike. It's really just for self-defense or to defend someone else. But it still gives you some sort of confidence that you know, okay, if I ever get in a situation like this and there's no other way out, then I know what to do and how to do it. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but at least it gives you this confidence.
Yeah, this feeling of security as well,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that. Just the things I saw, or also people I talk to, like when people get to know you, they know you do martial arts, they're like, yeah, I also did that course and da-da-da, and you're like, sure. You know. But yeah, it's interesting to see, because I face the topic every time I meet some new people and they hear that you do martial arts. They're like, yeah, can we do a self-defense class or something, like for an evening, you know, to show us that we feel safer. So I still see this thinking in a lot of people's heads. But as you said, there's also some positives to it. If you do it right, if you teach the right elements to it, it's not just useless, but it can be dangerous. Yeah.
I mean, I think the first principle in self-defense should be, if you can, run away. It's not because you're a coward, but if you have the option, just run. That's the best self-defense.
Absolutely. If you can't be hit, it's the best situation.
Because, and that's what I actually love about karate, and which is one of the 20 principles that the founder of karate, Gishin Funakoshi, wrote down, is that essentially there's no first strike. So karate is purely for self-defense, and you should only engage in like such a self-defense act if there's literally no other way. In that case, obviously you need to know what you do, and it's good to know these techniques and everything.
Yeah.
But the best case scenario is to never get in a situation where you actually have to use it.
Fully with you, but I also stand quite intense by the fact I'm rather a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Because if I'm a gardener in a war, yeah, it's going to be a very short war, you know.
At least for you.
For me, at least, yeah. So
no, I totally agree.
Better be prepared than not be prepared. But yeah, moving on from the self-defense topic, do you see anything like today, also maybe with your friends or family or coworkers, that you say, if I wouldn't have done martial arts, I would also have this trait, and I believe this trait is negative, something like this?
That's a hard question.
I know. I like to ask hard questions.
I think respect and discipline. Not to say that people around me are not respectful or not disciplined. I mean, if they wouldn't be respectful, I wouldn't hang out with them. But this is something that's so drilled into you that you respect everyone, no matter what they do. And you have to have respect for every person, even if they don't treat you well. And I see that some people kind of start to lose respect or treat others in a kind of bad way when they feel disrespected, which is, I totally understand where this is coming from. But because we had this respect thought so kind of hammered in, I still continue to pay people respect even if they disrespect me. And I think this is also somehow a superpower. And then the next thing is just discipline. Maybe you can call it also resilience. I don't know how to call it, but to basically just get up, do your thing, push through it even if it's hard, especially if it's hard, and not give up. Or let me phrase it differently, know when to give up and when to change something and when not to push through, but not just because of laziness or because you're tired or whatever, but really because it's a conscious decision.
Yeah, I think this awareness, what we can do and can't do, was a very hard learning in martial arts, because you got pushed to the limit quite often actually and beyond. And it was maybe from a teaching point not always the best thing to do in that moment for teaching a certain skill. But in the bigger picture, it's insanely valuable, because you learn that maybe sometimes life's just not fair. Or maybe you have to do something that's super tough. And you just follow through, you go through with it, and then you continue. And for me, for example, like the summer camps were the best example. You have like 5 days of practice, I think there were 2 practices in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and totaling between 4 and 6 hours a day, depending on how many classes you did. And sometimes, I don't know how your sensei was, but my sensei, when we had exams, like for the next belt, was additional training, like before or after practice. The belt exam, additional training. So you had to this 4 to 6 hours, an additional hour belt preparation or belt exam preparation. And you were like, why are you doing this to me? But it grounded myself, and I was like, yeah, just trust the process, just follow through. And I see it now also in my daily life. There's so many people, if they get one additional task, they're like going crazy. And you're like, yeah, it's uncomfortable. I probably shouldn't say yes, but I like the topic, or I can help somebody, and it's for me like 5-10 additional minutes. Let's just quickly do it, even though my workload is high. And I think this resilience, as you mentioned it, and also this amount of willpower you have to develop to push through, because after 5 days, and the exam is usually on the last day, you're just completely dead. And then it's just your mind commanding your body to do. And this, I think, is a learning nobody can ever take away once you've been through this process, that your mind is so much stronger than anything else. Stronger than your body, stronger than your thoughts if you use your mind correctly. And I think for me that was the biggest takeaway from martial arts, to use my mind in the right way and also utilize it in daily life.
Yeah, it's incredible, the power of the mind. I also experienced that, especially during our beloved summer camps, because it's really, your muscles are shaking because you think you can't do anything anymore. You're hurting, your muscles are aching, they're terribly shaking, but you still push through, and you can actually push through if you have the right mindset. And that was an incredible learning, which just goes to show how powerful the mind can be, but also kind of, it has positive sides if you can utilize it in a good way, but it also goes to show that it can also have very destructive consequences if you don't use it in the right way.
What do you mean with that? Because I mean, I say if you focus on something, focus on the positive, then you get to see that. But now I'm asking, like, what would be negative, or how can you focus on something negative?
Because your thoughts have such a great power over basically how you think and how you act, and also how your body behaves. I think you can really, by power of mind, push through very, very uncomfortable situations, be it physical, emotional, whatever. But you can also, once you give up, then it's game over. That's what I mean. Because then your thoughts are steering you in the completely opposite direction.
Fair, but we learned that this is not an option.
Yeah, for us it is. Or it isn't, depending on how you look at it. But I mean, like that's what I mean with the realization of how much power your thoughts have over you. It's really about what you tell yourself.
Yeah, but I also think sometimes you're gonna lose battles. It's important to know, just because you lose a battle doesn't mean you're gonna lose the war. So sometimes you have also strategically to forfeit a battle maybe, and say, okay, I'm gonna pull back, however this looks like, and then you're gonna strategize or think, what are my next moves? How do I move the pieces across the chessboard and stuff like that? Because if you have that power to realize when to retreat and when to attack again, whether it's in a fight, in a discussion, when you want more salary from your boss or whatever, it's gonna help. And I think that's very valuable to be able to do that. I think what you mentioned, that it's gonna be dangerous when it's going downwards. And I know this is not a very widespread opinion I have, but I think that's something everybody needs to learn. And it's like, life stuff, get a helmet, use your helmet and don't run against the wall without a helmet, and just learn it.
Try avoid running against the wall maybe as well, but if you have to, then with a helmet.
You can whine and cry about it, that you don't have this trait which we learned in martial arts, or you can just suck it up and learn it, and you're able to utilize it. I know it's not that easy, but you cannot just cry about it and don't do anything about it. Either you stop complaining or you do something about it. But I strongly believe the power of the mind is something so many people lack, and so many people could do so much more. And if they learn to utilize this because it's so powerful, the world could look way different, I believe.
I think many people underestimate what their thoughts are doing and how much power they actually have in their thoughts. I don't know where this is from, but you have to be very mindful what you tell yourself and how you also define yourself, because that will stick. I think it's in the context of smoking. I mean, I never smoked and don't plan on starting, but one thing that I heard is like, when you want to quit smoking, you're not a smoker who's trying to quit, but you have to tell yourself, I'm a non-smoker. And that's the way more efficient process to do this, because it's really a mindset shift. Totally agree that people underestimate it and don't leverage this enough.
I think, speaking of the mind, I quickly want to jump to one of my questions I wrote down for today.
All right.
There is this topic we already touched a little bit, and it's about martial arts versus sport. And we've both been in the area where, especially karate, because we both did karate, moved from only a martial art into being an Olympic sport in Tokyo 2020, or when it was held 2021. But we went from it's non-Olympic, it gets more professional, lots and lots of rules changed. And also we had an Olympic appearance with the sport. Now it's not Olympic anymore. I'm really asking myself, was it good for the sport, this change to be an Olympic sport? Was it the right direction? Or do we have to look at it as two different kind of sports? Like one is a martial art and the other one is sports karate.
I never did competitions. Maybe I have to preface it. You did,
All right?
right?
Yeah.
I once had the opportunity to join the national team for katas, and then I broke my hand. So I never made it on the team. There was some other stuff going on too, but I think the two are, from what I've seen and experienced through others, I think the two are very different. On the one hand, you have karate, the martial art, and then on the other hand, you have karate, the sport. So I do think there's a huge difference between the two. Although the movements might be quite similar or even the same to some extent, maybe they're executed in a slightly different or way for the martial art versus the sport aspect. But the rules are different. And also I think just the mindset, or I don't want to say the spirit around it, but kind of the atmosphere is quite different. In karate, it's more about, I think, learning something, some maybe also a bit of self-defense, but it has a lot to do also with the philosophy behind it. As we mentioned, like discipline, respect, pushing your boundaries, all that stuff. Versus with the sport, it's more like crude force, or like who can win, which is not necessarily the goal in martial arts, because we don't look for fights to begin with. Or what is your opinion? Because you did actually compete.
I have a very split way of thought in this area.
All right.
Because on the one hand side, I was like, I want to do competitions. Because I was always told, if you're young, you should do competitions. And lots of the rule changes I did not like. And I think they were like senseless or stupid or whatever. In terms of sport karate, and as a competitor, I appreciated the changes and I really liked them because transparency, I knew how to get good points or make a point in fighting. But if I look at the martial arts background, I feel like lots of people doing only the sports version, it loses its edge. Because if it's just about the sports version, karate is very unique because you can do both. And karate builds on character, on this gigantic background on where it comes from. Like, as we said, the respect, the journey you have to go through, how you learn, just how you enter a dojo, how you bow and everything. This is so important. And I met a lot of competitors that didn't have the basic signs of respect in karate. And I think they never really did real karate, especially the people fighting. They were just like in the fighting part. People that did kata, they of course had to know some karate because they had to perform a kata. But I think this backbone of real martial arts, like old school traditional karate, is necessary and extremely valuable. Because if more and more people only do sports karate, there will be more and more sports karate dojos, and the traditional one will die. And I think that's very dangerous, because it's in my eyes, an amazing tradition, and it teaches you extremely valuable life lessons, but you only get them if you do the traditional one. Of course, there are also some sports karate teachers and senseis that teach them quite well, but they're also the other kind. And I think to have there a mix, and I think actually just something popping up in my mind, Karate Kid, that's now streaming on Netflix, is a perfect example with Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. I think it's a perfect example. And for those of you who watch the show on Netflix, like, they're super different karate styles. And at one point, I think, don't remember exactly, they combine those two, and the combination is what makes them really, really strong. And I think that's also the way we should go. But the baseline should be the traditional one and the martial arts. And the sports one is just like something on top you do when you're young, like until you're 30, 35-ish. And then you still have like 60 years to go. And in these 60 years, you're going to be way too slow for international competitions, or mostly. And then you still should practice martial arts, I believe, because it's a school for life. Even though I'm currently not actively practicing, I'm planning on returning into practice soon, to just keep it up again when I get older. I want to keep practicing. I want to also share this knowledge with my friends and family, because it's such a big part of my life.
Yeah, very, very nicely said. I mean, I think I cannot really add to this, because I've never been in competitions, but I agree that with the notion that it should be an extension of the traditional martial arts and not a standalone, because a lot of it gets lost. Speaking of what gets lost, what was the most important lesson, or some of the most important lessons that you took away from karate? Because it is kind of a school of life that teaches you a lot, that just goes beyond how to move your arms, your legs, how to defend yourself.
It's a tough question, because as mentioned, I took away a lot from these 17 years over in my daily life. If I had to choose one certain thing, I believe never ever take anything for granted.
All right.
It's like, even if you did something 10 million times, stay focused. You have to put in your all every time, every day, every second of it, to achieve what you want to achieve. Because karate is brutal. Not in terms of fighting. It can be, of course, but it's extremely brutal. If you slip up for 1 second, you can lose your fight, you can have to redo your belt exam, you might lose the respect of people. It's like slipping up for 1 millisecond, and you can lose that much. And that's, for me, to always stay focused, never take anything for granted. Like the skills you have, the knowledge you have, is it in your job, about social situations, about whatever. Never take it for granted, even if you just have it. Because I can still walk into a gym and just teach. But I'm also aware I can lose this at any moment if I slip up. Because if I don't have the respect from my pupils or from the other people I'm practicing with, they're not going to do what I want to tell them. They're like, yeah, whatever. And this is what I mean with slipping up and not taking it for granted. You always have to put in the work. You always have to be aware it can be gone within a second. And also have the respect for people that do this for like 50 years and not slipping up for like a second. Of course, everybody slips up. You're not going to lose everything. But the more aware I am of this, the more I value the skills I have, and also try to preserve them, and also try to teach myself more things and add into that knowledge backpack. And I think it's also extremely valuable to also then see how it goes in other sports. Mm-hmm. That's for me a very big point, I think.
So with slipping up, you basically mean as soon as you stop learning, as soon as you stop improving, as soon as you stop practicing, basically it's not just that you come to a standstill, but you're actually regressing. That's what you mean with slipping up and kind of losing focus.
Yeah, as well. Or for example, that happened to me in a belt exam, you do one wrong movement and then you have to redo. And it's like an exam that goes, 2, 3, 4 hours. And one movement is wrong and you have to redo it. And it's absolutely fair to redo it, because it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to go strive for perfection. If it would be easy, everybody would be, I don't know, the 20th black belt or whatever, and it's supposed to be hard. And that's why also a lot of people work very hard for it. But like, even if it's like in a belt exam, this 1 second you slip up, or this one movement, or is it like you said, like you stop learning and regressing and like all your skills go away? For me, this is all one of the things of not taking anything for granted. And I think you can also expand it then, but then we get very philosophical. Like, we're both healthy, we have a roof over our head. I don't know how many people listening, if anybody listens at this point, are aware that having this and taking this for granted, or being more or less healthy, we all have our little ouchies and whatever, but having this is extremely valuable. And I think a lot of people forget this and also taking this for granted. And I think we should not, because we're very privileged to be in this situation.
That you just show a little bit more of gratitude towards what you have and what you've achieved, and realize that not everyone is in such a fortunate position, be it being healthy, having enough money to put food on the table, to actually have an apartment or a house or something. I agree.
Yeah, and I know it's quite philosophical on the one hand, but on the other hand, I think we just have to open our eyes and accept that it is this way. It is not guaranteed for everybody. And it's not that philosophical, it's just facts at the end of the day.
Yeah, you lose your job, and then depending on how much savings you have, maybe you cannot sustain yourself for more than a month or 2 or 3. And then you might lose your house, or because you cannot pay rent, things like that. And cancer also doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, right. So that's for me a key learning. But it was quite a big turnaround over this one small sentence. But I would also like to return the favor for you. If you have, I know we both did a lot of learnings, but if you have to choose one simple key learning, what would it be, and how do you apply it in your daily life?
I think my key learning would be responsibility, and that has many layers. That's why I like it. Responsibility, first of all, because the idea behind karate is karate means empty hand, right? So you don't have any weapons, and you just basically fight with your hands and your feet. And the idea is that these become swords, so that you have deadly weapons without holding any weapons. So the first aspect is, all right, we're both black belts. I think we both know how to kill someone with our hands. We know what you would have to do, but you obviously don't do it, and because very obvious reasons.
I hope we never get put into such a situation where we have to face this consequences or actions.
Exactly. So this is one aspect of responsibility, and I became very, very aware of that, because whenever I tell people that I have a black belt in karate, everyone goes like, oh my goodness, I need to be careful now. And I'm like, no, no, you don't. I will not attack you. Anyway, so that's one aspect of the responsibility, knowing your abilities and how they could potentially hurt someone, and not using them to intentionally hurt someone. So that's one aspect of it. But also responsibility in a sense of personal responsibility, that you are responsible if you fuck up, if something bad happens, even if it's not your fault, that you just take ownership and just critically think what you could change now, how you can change to improve the situation, even if it's just your mindset. Going back to, for example, okay, is it really fair that the entire class has to do 50 push-ups because one guy behaved rudely or didn't do what the coach was saying, stuff like that? Is this really fair? Maybe, maybe not. But you can take the responsibility kind of on you and say, okay, what can I do now? I can complain about it. I can think the trainer, like the coach, is an asshole. I can be angry with the other guy, or I can view it as a nice additional exercise that will get me stronger, for example. So just kind of the responsibility that you are always, in control of your thoughts at least, and of your actions.
And how you view things, yeah.
How you view things, exactly.
I think it's a very good point, because I think you've also been an instructor, right? So you've been teaching also some classes.
Yeah, for 3 years.
for me, it's always like these mentors or senseis, as we call it in karate. They're like very important people in our lives. As we mentioned, Sugimura Sensei in the beginning, he was the chief instructor of Switzerland. And I think he had the 8th black belt.
Seventh or eighth, yeah.
7th or 8th down. And I think this people you have in every club, you have one sensei, and you have a lot of different coaches and instructors usually. And I think we or in karate, usually you become an instructor quite young, or in the clubs I know. And I think when I was like 10 to 12 years old, I was teaching my first kids classes. They were like 4 years younger, and you were like, yeah, now you do this and that, and let's go Oitsuki and Maigeri and whatever. But you learn this responsibility quite young. But looking on the other side, who those people were for us, like what kind of importance did your sensei, not now saying Sugi sensei, but like your dojo sensei have on you, on your life? Because sometimes things go well, sometimes they do not. And I think they're also quite related to our dojos, because it's like your karate family or your closest karate family you have. And the sensei is quite an important personality in that area. Or at least for me it was.
So for me it depends, because some really just fostered the sports aspect of it or the technical aspect of karate. So we would just do trainings where we really drilled on the technique, for example, and really improved this one aspect or this little detail to just get it a notch better than it was before. And that was certainly very nice from a technical point of view, from a sports point of view, but they didn't really have that much of an impact on me, because it was essentially just about the movement. The greater impact came from those senseis who also taught a little bit about the philosophy of karate, and then through that taught some, you can say, life lessons. And the one that comes to mind is probably the one I had when I started out as a kid, because that really was the first contact I had with the philosophy behind karate, with the respect, with discipline, with responsibility that comes with the knowledge that we have, but also this personal responsibility and responsibility for your, like, let's say, classmates, that you make sure that the other one doesn't behave rudely, because otherwise everyone else will get punished as well. Things like that, so that you look out for each other and try to make each other behave better, nicer, and so on.
I think if you say one of these like philosophical topics that pops up in my mind, I'm not sure if you were in the same gym back in the day, but there was one, I'm not sure if it was an Easter or summer camp, where Sensei Ben Isenecker taught us about the way of the belt. Like the white belt is like the snowy surface, and then the yellow belt, is the first spring flowers coming up, and at the end you're a black belt, and you're in the universe, you have the energy of the universe. And I think that's one of my first memories about this more philosophical part, and just remembering that there's way more story behind than just, you're upgrading your belt color, or you're hitting a wall or a board or whatever. It's just more than that. And for me, also my sensei I had, Katie from Vaduz, she was also a very present figure in my life. Was it through competitions? Was it through practices, or when we went internationally and abroad and stuff like that? So it was also quite a lot of learning in terms of what does a national federation do, because we were going internationally with the Liechtenstein Federation. What are the, not secrets behind it, but what do you have to do? How does it work? What is important? What you need to look at? What are the implications for certain things? And just going beyond the sport and not just the body movement part, also like about certain things in politics, certain things in how does a club work, how does a federation work, because I was like 14, no clue about that stuff, and having these possibilities to learn this at such a young age was extremely valuable. And that's why for me it was not just the body movement and also that, but also this add-on with this federation stuff and club stuff was extremely valuable to learn.
Did you also think that back then, or is it more something you think now when you look back?
I think I always liked it. I always loved to learn these things and to hear about why we do certain things, like also the background of karate, all the philosophical topics. And yes, sometimes it was like boring in the term of I want to move, but I always valued the message because I think the messages were important, and I never had been told something I was like I disagreed with. It's like very generic, and you can do with it what you want at the end of the day. So therefore I was always quite interested in it naturally already. But yeah, of course now it's even more, because now I see what my skill set is because I did that back then, and I'm eternally grateful for all the people that pushed me. There's so many people that added to that and helped, and I wouldn't be there where I am today without them. And that's a lot of that has been through karate. So yeah, it's, as you see, it's quite a big and important part of my life, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. Of course, there's been some learnings along the way, but without those learnings, you wouldn't have learned it, right? If you didn't fail, you wouldn't learn it. So.
Oh yeah, I think the failing is just the first attempt in learning something new, and you have to fail to get better.
Agreed. And I think I'm actually not sure who said this, but one of the quotes, or also our senseis said often, a black belt is just a white belt who never gave up. And as soon as you become a black belt, the real karate kind of starts. And I think there's so much more to that than just this simple sentence. And I can't quite describe it, but there's so much truth behind that. Like, you need to have a certain baseline of knowledge about anything to really understand and utilize the topic at the end of the day.
Yeah, now it gets very into knowledge theory and like Dunning-Kruger and effect and all that stuff. But yeah, you only start to realize how much there's still ahead of you once you have a decent amount of knowledge in a given area. Because then you realize how much you already don't know, or how your technique still sucks even though you're a black belt, and how you could improve it, and every tiny detail that is still wrong, quote unquote.
Has there been like a certain challenge or a limit you faced for a while and then could break it thanks through the martial arts, like through this way of life or school of life, whether it be on a private level or also in sports? Because I think that's something we touched base before a little bit, but is there like something specific you say, I thought about that, or I was in a fight with this topic for so long and XYZ helped me to break through?
There are a couple of things, yes, but it's very hard to say whether this was because of karate or because of something that I learned there. And then it's also very hard to say whether did I really learn this in karate? Did I pick it up somewhere else during that same time period? So I don't know. It's very hard to say. This is the best I can do. Very probably yes, but in hindsight it's very hard to dissect where it came from. Just in general though, I think striving to be better, not perfect, because I know this is an end goal that you can never achieve, but just in whatever you do it right, try to be better, and that just extends to so many areas of my life. But yeah, I couldn't pinpoint to a specific moment or situation. Is there something like that for you?
I mean, I have quite a similar answer. I don't really know, but I just know there have been a lot of situations that showed me, and sorry to say in quotes, to not be a bitch. Like I remember one practice, I was driving to an external dojo, and the sensei asked me after 10 minutes to step forward and asked me how old I am. I was like, yeah, 14. And he's like, yeah, why do you train like a 5-year-old? Then you can wait outside. And I was like, damn, he's right. I should invest. I drove 2 hours on a school night to drive back on a school night and like go to bed at 1 a.m. with 14 years of age, which was not normal back then for me. And you know, I invested so much time to give half the effort. And of course it was quite a harsh comment, but for me this comment was so valuable. And I think about this still a lot, because it's, am I really working how I'm supposed to work? Am I really teaching how I'm supposed to teach? Or can I do more? Because I always need to be at my best, or not need, but I want to be at my best to provide the best for others or for myself for the progress. And this is one quite specific moment I remember very well. And I think a lot of people nowadays would be like crying and like, you can't talk to a kid like this. And I'm like, tell me, give me this information, because I know you just telling me this because you want me to progress and not because you're mean. Because at the end of the day, it was truth. I moved shitty, I was lazy as fuck, and I got it told, and I improved because I was allowed to finish the class. That's the end of the story for me.
Some things obviously are inappropriate to say, but in that context, I think it was perfectly fine. Because if it's the truth, then why would you get offended by it?
Maybe also to mention, the sensei that told me that knew me for quite some years, and he knew how to handle myself. So it's not like some random dude that just told me this. I think that's important to say. But I responded quite well to these kind of comments. And he knew that, and so he utilized it. And I valued it. And as you see, it's like, I don't know how many years later now, over a decade, and I still remember it.
So it had a very profound impact.
It did. I think we talked a lot about now certain topics about karate and the aspects of life to it, but what I'm really wondering, and I think we didn't pick this up in the beginning, how did we get into it? I mean, I know how I got into it, but I never knew how you got into karate. So I was wondering that today when preparing for the pod.
This is very coincidental. So I was 7 years old, and my, I would argue, best friend back then, basically he saw a poster with his parents at a bus stop where they advertised that a new class for children starting age 6 in karate would start in the town next by. And he told me this, and he told his parents, and his parents were like, yeah, sure, we can sign you up for this trial lesson. You can go there and see if this is something for you. And he told me about this after he went, because that trial class was on a Monday. And I was like, fuck, I really want to do this too. And I want to go there. And then I could go to another trial lesson I was on a Wednesday. And yeah, I do still remember this because it was a very profound moment in my life. I can't tell you the dates, but I know it was a Monday and a Wednesday. So I told my parents about it, and they were like, yeah, cool, you can go. We can sign you up. My parents were always strong proponents of us doing, so me and my brother doing some sort of sports. My dad was really excited about the idea that his daughter could defend herself. He had to worry about me a little bit less, I guess. And my friend actually ended up quitting after, I think, a year. Yeah, and I stayed.
For a little bit longer.
For a little bit longer. For like 15 years longer. How did you get into it?
I remember actually the date. It was 5th of March, 2005.
Oh, you have an advantage over me. I don't know the date.
I remember that quite well. And I came home one day. That's my parents told me that. And they were like, I asked them, hey, I want to do karate or judo. Just some kind of martial arts to get big and strong. That was my comment when I came from school.
At 7 years old.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years old, something
Nice.
like that. I want to be big and strong and want to do a martial art. And the same day when I came home from school, there was an ad in the newspaper for karate. And they were like, yeah, it's like next Tuesday. You want to go? I'm like, yeah, sure. And my dad took me, and I somehow stuck to it for 17 years.
The rest is history.
Exactly. And I remember we were like, how many people? I think 40 kids in that class, in the beginners class. And after, I don't know, 5 years, there were maybe a handful. And after 10 years was 2. And at the end, it was only me that was left over, kind of. So it was very thinned out. But the funny thing is, there was an adult, also back in the day. He also started on the same day, but of course in the adults class. And he's still doing karate. I think he's a 3rd-degree black belt now. So super funny story. We found that out one day. And yeah. Also my parents, they were super happy that I wanted to do a sport, because I didn't want to go to soccer or to gymnastics or something like that. And they were happy that I had an interest in something. And they also supported me with like driving and watching and going to competitions and, so was quite happy about that.
Yeah, and you need to have, like, I think, a supportive family like this, because you at that age you cannot go by yourself.
Yeah, and I know it continued quite long. So I do remember my mom always drove me, because practice was like at 5 p.m. So my dad couldn't because he was working. and my mom drove me 2 times a week. She watched for an hour on a super, super, super not so nice bank lift in the gym,
Yeah.
which was wooden and super uncomfortable. It was cold in the gym, but like for I don't know how many years, I think 10 to 12 years, every week, 2 to 3 times, she drove me, she watched my lesson, and she drove me home. And I think that kind of support, I mean, yes, it's quite insane to have this support, but that's something extremely valuable, I think. And without that, I also don't know if I would have pulled through. But as you said, like if you're 5, 6 years old, you can't really travel that far by bus, and would have been over an hour by bus. So it was extremely valuable, this support. Just having parents, as you had in general, that support you when you do something like a hobby or sport, also something you shouldn't take for granted nowadays.
No, definitely. You should definitely tell your parents that you're very grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I should do that more, yeah.
Maybe you should call her after we stop recording this episode.
Or I just send her the episode so she watches it and we get some more views. But yeah, I can also call.
Man, you're already thinking about getting more exposure.
Everything for the gram. No, kidding
All right,
aside.
okay.
But yeah, I think martial arts is for both of us quite a big part in life. And for me, if I have like one vision or wish, in general in the martial arts community, I just wish it would be more widely spread, because there's still quite a negative stigma around martial arts. That's brutal, you just hit each other. But the learning aspect is not that in the foreground yet, much more than it has been 20 years ago, but still not enough. And I think that would be something really nice to have it spread even more, that more people do martial arts, that more people learn what it can be and what it's supposed to be, and really learn the value behind it. This is something I wish for, because as we talked about, for me it was extremely valuable to go through this journey, and I learned so much.
Do you think there are certain groups of people who martial arts is not suited for?
I don't think so. I've watched every kind of human do martial arts, from young to old. There's also something called para karate. And I think I've never been more impressed in my life when I first saw this at the World Championship. Somebody who is blind doing an unsu 360 kick, like 10 times better than anybody I saw ever do it. And I'm like, bro, how the F you learn that when you're blind? This shows me that martial arts is for everybody. Maybe not the fighting part, but learning the forms, learning the respect and values behind it. I 100% believe everybody can learn that. Not everybody can become a 5th degree black belt, but everybody can learn the basics of it and also go through the journey of learning it, I believe.
Yeah, there's some sort of benefit, be it physical, mental, psychological, that probably everyone can take away from it.
And there's also not just karate, there's a lot of different martial arts, right?
Yeah, true.
I mean, we mainly focus on karate because that's our experience we have, but I think there's also a lot of different martial arts, and I also believe nothing is good or bad. It's just different. Also, one thing I think Sugi always said, it doesn't need to be good or bad. It's different, and depending on where you stand, it suits you more or less.
I agree with this, but I think if I would elaborate, then that's another podcast.
Joining into the third hour of this episode.
I think we're at 1 hour or something. Still okay. What I wanted to ask is, do you have any experience with another martial art?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
Quite a few. So I joined kickboxing, I think, for 1.5 to 2 years in Liechtenstein. Was also an extremely cool experience, amazing people. There was more about really also endurance, pushing really the body. But the level of respect and quality of fighting was also extremely high. So also super cool to see this. And when I was in the US, when I lived in Texas, I did some jiu-jitsu, just some random sessions, but still it was super cool to see like this movement around the body, and like you push at some points and then you're knocked out. And also there I experienced when somebody that's like 40 kilos lighter than me chokes my neck, I'm out. So that was also something really impressive to see. And besides that, I think I did some single courses like a week of boxing or a week of this and that, just to see what others do, because I think it's really interesting to see the differences and take the good things with me and the learnings, and then apply it in my own thing. For you, I know you're flying right now and you do powerlifting, but any other martial arts experiences?
Actually, also jiu-jitsu. Did that with a friend. Not really for a long time, but kind of intermittently on off. Went to some trainings, then maybe a few weeks I didn't go, then I went again, just to try something else. And the same with boxing, just regular boxing. Boxing taught me a great deal about your defense.
Like keeping your hands up.
Keeping your hands up always, all the time, and not just like we do in karate, kind of somewhere in front of you. It was really in front of your face. I got hit a lot. Let me put it like that. But it was a good learning, and I think that's what is maybe also valuable to everyone who does some sort of martial arts, to just try some other stuff as well. Not because you want to get into it or advance very far, but because it can advance like your original martial art, the one that you started with, in our case, karate. Because different martial arts or sports like boxing, they put emphasis on different aspects. And then you can decide for yourself whether this is something that you can incorporate back into your training, how you can maybe adapt your technique, what you might be looking out for, or just something to be mindful and aware of, or if you just want to discard it as an experience.
I really would love to try actually Wing Chun.
Okay.
This is something that has been on my to-do list, because I want to see how different it is and what I can utilize, as you mentioned, in other sports. But I know I saw a lot of movies, and it's still a movie, but also like the background where it's coming from. I think it's very interesting, and just the style of fighting, I think it's very effective, but also super hard to do. But it's also very rare as far as I saw. So it's hard to find like a place to practice regularly. And also with my kind of calendar currently, not in the books for now, but maybe in a few years then.
But hey, then you have something to look forward to.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you have something that that people get wrong about karate or martial arts in general? Like a stereotype or a prejudice, something like that?
I think you mentioned it before, 99% the reaction is like, oh, I have to watch out what I say. Don't hit me. Don't be mean to me. So a lot of people, I believe one part is like making a little bit of fun of it, but some are also quite serious because they're effectively afraid that you're just going to hit them if they look at you wrongly. And I think that's quite a big topic. They're like this afraidness of, oh shit, what's going to happen? And then you have the other half that do like, hiya, it's not the real martial art and it's just like Karate Kid, blah, blah. And I think those two go hand in hand. It's like 50-50. And I think both of them are not true. And I face them quite often, actually. Even though I'm kind of retired since 3 years, I still face those topics.
Which one do you encounter more, or is it really a 50-50 mix?
It's quite a 50-50. The more socially, like party-wise or friends-wise, the more it is in the terminology of making fun or looking at it funny. But especially in business, like in a company I work with or with customers or partners, they're like, oh, okay, you do martial arts? Okay, all good. You're a black belt? Okay. You know, there it's quite different. For me also there, the experience was, if you tell somebody you do martial arts or you did martial arts for this long period of time and that you have a black belt, the level of respect immediately changes, especially when you're younger, because I was working in some projects with people twice my age, and then it's always like, yeah, the youngster, he does not have any experience, doesn't know what he's talking about. And when they got to know you a little and like you're a coach, you practice something for this many years, you're a master in this sport, it changes the way they look at you and also the level of respect and also how they approach you, I think. Not extremely, but sometimes it gives you this little push you need to get what you want, actually.
Do you think it would be a different kind of reaction if you did, let's say, play football for 15 years, even if you were a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% sure. I don't want to talk negative about anything, but soccer is a very different topic than karate. Not to say soccer is bad. it's different. And I think the part in karate added more value to my life, where it would have been with soccer. On the other hand, I barely can catch a ball or throw a ball, whatever. I'm really bad with that. Maybe that also pointed me into a different direction, but that's just a side note to that.
Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset around these two sports that are just so different you cannot even really compare it. Maybe it also has to do with football being very mainstream, and therefore it's not regarded as something that special as a bit of a more exotic sport like karate.
And I think it's funny that we're in this comparison right now, because did you know that there's actually way more in injuries in soccer than there are in martial arts? It's crazy, the difference.
I never knew the numbers, but I actually always thought that it has to be the case, because the number of ACL tears or just musculoskeletal injuries in general seems like very high in soccer. Everyone I know who's played soccer for some time has had an injury, versus I only had one serious injury in karate. I broke my hand, but that was essentially my fault.
Close your fist when you block a maigiri.
Exactly.
In the 17 years I did karate, I experienced in a club of about 100 to 120 people, I experienced one broken finger. Over 17 years with 120 people coming and going, I mean, that's an insane low number. Maybe we were just lucky, but also with people from other clubs I talked about, there's not been many insane injuries. I think one I saw was or heard mostly at the Fuji Cup when a shin broke. That was quite intense, with a mawashigiri going to the hips, and it like cracked. But otherwise, I'm not aware of any other severe injuries, to be honest. And as you said, all my friends playing soccer, they have like every second week they walk on crutches, or they're in the hospital or can't do sports and stuff like that. But maybe it's also because there are way more people playing soccer than doing karate. There's also a difference in that, right? So
there's a difference in that too, but also the amount of body contact that you have is very high in soccer. Maybe except you're the goalkeeper, then maybe not. But at least the type of karate that we practiced, Shotokan karate, we usually don't have full contact. So everything is extremely controlled. You have to have very high levels of bodily control to stop a fist a few millimeters in front of your opponent's face. So you never actually hit people.
I think it's actually hard to learn to hit people.
It is.
You're naturally in that moment to not hit somebody. And if you have to switch, I think this is a really hard switch, if you really have to. Because I saw it in the injury last weekend with my eye. For the person that injured my face, like that made my blue eye, it was mentally way tougher for her than for me, because I was like, yeah, it's a blue eye, whatever, I don't care, let's move on. But it's for the person that's injuring the other person, maybe it's also a martial arts thing, it's usually tougher on the mental side than the person getting injured. Especially if it's usually you don't injure somebody on purpose and it's an accident. And I think that's also a very interesting aspect though.
Because we're not used to it, and we're trained not to do it. Not in a sense of, obviously during practice you shouldn't hit someone, but also because we have this mindset, there's no first strike and it's purely for self-defense, and you try to avoid situations like these at all cost. I think that makes it even harder mentally. But what I meant with, or what I was going at with the fewer injury rates in karate than in other sports, I think that definitely contributes, that we don't really have on a kind of full body contact on a regular basis.
And it also makes practice much safer. What pops in my mind, we need to hop in a gi and have a practice session soon again. Because I wanted to go end of last year, I wanted to practice somewhere, somehow, because there was a lot of dojos around, but I just didn't have the time, and I'm like, I want to make the time, because I really miss having a gi on, having my belt on, and practicing karate.
The same thought occurred to me as well, that I should probably at some point pick it up again. At the moment, I just don't see it happening, because I have so many other things that I want to do and I prioritize at the moment. But I definitely don't exclude the possibility that sometimes I'm back in the dojo.
For me, it's clear latest with like 40, when I can't do cheer anymore or stuff like that, is like gone because I'm just too old. I'm gonna add another 40 years of karate then.
That sounds like a solid plan.
I might need some restarting with movement, with mobility, because I'm as mobile as a dry stick of bread. But after a few weeks or months, I guess it should be fine again.
When you restart with 40, maybe make it a couple months, not weeks.
I still stay sportive until then, just FYI.
But you're also doing sports now, and you just described yourself as flexible as some dry piece of bread.
Fair enough. Reflecting on our karate journey, it brought me an immense amount of joy to think about the good old times, about what we did, what we achieved, what we went through, individually or also together in karate, in training camps. It's something everybody who does it can be proud, whether it's a year or 15 or 20 years. And I think sometimes I forget myself, and it makes me really happy that we had this reflective episode.
That's very nice. That's why we're doing it, right?
Yeah, basically to have a reason to talk, right? Perfect. Then I think nothing more to say. Thanks for listening in, and
like and subscribe.
see you next time.
See you next time.